Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, I'm trying to revamp and find my flavor on here on YouTube with podcast style videos and audios. So if you see the different things that I'm doing with my videos, please ignore that. But I want to dive into a complex and sometimes controversial topic, especially here recently, with the dynamics of Black women who choose to divest and marry white men or date white men, but still express dislike and racism and hatred toward white and biracial women. And we'll also talk about the uncomfortable truth that some of these white men actually still hold racist views despite being in relationships with Black women or non-white women. And there's a lot to unpack, so I'm just going to get right into it. First off, let's talk about what divestment means. For those that are unfamiliar, this has been going on YouTube for a while, and I don't really notice it outside of YouTube or online where people talk about the divestment movement. A lot of these terms I'm just coming to realize here on YouTube, but it's used when Black women, often out of frustration with the dating dynamics in the Black community, whether it's due to feeling unwanted by Black men or tired of seeing Black men with non-Black women, they actively choose to seek out relationships with non-Black men, and more particularly with this movement, it's white men. This can be seen as a form of self-preservation or empowerment. It's not also without its complications, and divestors need to tread lightly when it comes to seeking validation from white men, to be honest, especially as a half-white person. I know a lot of how these white men operate, not saying all, but it's definitely not what people want to think. And one of the biggest controversies is the issue of how some Black women, despite dating or marrying white men, still harbor negative feelings toward white women. So what is that? Well, there are a few reasons for this. And some Black women may see white women as direct competition, whether they admit that or not. And especially because society often holds white women as the standard of beauty and femininity. I've reached this with different videos where I've talked about the white beauty standard, although it's changing and shifting a bit. White beauty is still upheld, and white men, regardless of them going into other relationships with non-white women, they still hold their women as the standard and they're still protected. So it doesn't matter if a white man has dated a Black woman or he's only dated Black women. They still uphold their image, and I think that's the biggest thing. But when you're constantly being told that white women are the ideal, it's not really a surprise that some Black women may develop these negative feelings towards them, especially when white women date Black men. At the same time, when it comes to biracial women that come from these white mothers, they're often the target and the hate in the Black community, and in particular with the Black women. And then on top of that, there's also a historical context that we can't really ignore. And the interracial relationships, especially between Black women and white men, that comes from a long history of power imbalances and exploitation. And I mentioned this in other videos as well, where this interracial dating between white men and Black women, and some Black women will say that we're the ones that are exotic, or white men call us exotic because we look so different. But that's not a good thing because it's not from a preference. They're not looking at you as the preference. Maybe some white men do prefer Black women or non-white women. But generally, like I mentioned, they uphold their own standard of beauty in their women. They keep their women protected no matter what they do. And they have the power to do that because, for one, they still hold the power here. The white man does, regardless of what people think. That is the truth. And two, they've always preserved their image. So it doesn't matter what they do. But some Black women might feel that those power imbalances, even when they are dating or marrying white men, and they're still living in a world where white women are given an unfair advantage, which breeds that tension. So I understand that. And you can move to a white community, develop white conservative views, and have biracial children, but it won't give you the same status as being white. It never will. And I think of people like Candace Owens, who really is just a puppet and a token to white America. She has all these conservative views that a lot of white conservatives have, and nothing wrong with being conservative, but she's that ideal for white people because she's Black having these views. So they can say, see, we're not racist. See, we don't have these weird political views. Even Black people think so. And she's the token or the image of that. So anyone who sees her and sees her talking points, she's doing that because she is a puppet. And she's also married to a white man with biracial children. So a lot of Black women will do this thinking that they have power, but she really doesn't. Here's where things get even more complicated. While some Black women might divest and marry white men to escape certain stereotypes or struggles they face within the Black community, as I was just talking with Candace Owens, it's important to remember that not all white men are actually quote unquote woke or completely free of racist views. And just because a white man dates or marries a Black woman, as I was mentioning before, it doesn't mean that he's absolved from holding problematic beliefs about race. And I've had many discussions with white men who may not even refer to themselves as racist, but will hold these subtle racist views that he was raised around. I've mentioned in previous videos that white people are kind of raised in a bubble when it comes to race because they've never had to really go through the struggles when it comes to their race. They might struggle in other aspects of life, but it doesn't have to do with their race. And they may say things like white privilege isn't really a thing, or slavery was so long ago, get over it, or even argue that they never had any privileges. That's a big one with white privilege and white men in particular, saying that I never had privilege. I worked hard for everything I have. That's kind of a blindness to the white privilege discussion because they're not seeing that it has nothing to do with if you were born with privilege or not, or being privileged. You can be dirt poor, but being a white man that's dirt poor on the street versus a Black man or some other type of person that's not white on the street, you have a better advantage because you're white. And that's all that is. It's just acknowledging that. And a lot of times they won't, because they weren't raised around that and they still hold these covert racist views. So that's why many Black women end up mentioning how they had to teach their white man about Blackness. I know a lot of Black women that are married to white men and they have to just teach them because there's a lot of sensitive topics, and especially with things that have been going on recently in the media. And you want to hear support from your loved one. And sometimes that's just not there. So again, with this divestment, it's not always roses over there. So to come at biracials and white women because you're angry or racist towards them, it kind of makes you look a little bit weird. And let's be real for a moment. We've all seen instances where white men fetishize Black women, seeing them as exotic or strong, but these are often rooted in harmful stereotypes that I've mentioned before, and it pertains to being exotic, and some of these white men might still support racist policies, especially in politics, that don't benefit Black and brown people, make microaggressive comments, or even have problematic views on race without fully realizing it. I have met some white men that they like Black women, but when they mention liking Black women, it's usually for things that are overly sexual, like, oh, because they got a big booty or because their bodies. And although those are things that, of course, you want your man to like about you, but that sounds like a fetish to me. It's one thing to have a preference for a certain race, but to say that's why I like them because of their body type or whatever it is, that's when it gets a little weird. So for Black women who divest, this can lead to a sense of disillusionment. And you might have thought that divesting would lead to a relationship where race isn't really a factor, but then you're faced with subtle racism from your own partner. I've also noticed that online that anytime a non-Black man is saying how much he loves Black women or he sees you, you're not disappearing here, I see you, babe, they melt and put him on a pedestal as if he's God. I see that all the time. It's so embarrassing. And I see divestment mainly as a way to get back at Black men for putting white and mixed and non-Black women on a pedestal. If a Black man is doing this, he doesn't care if you divest anyway. If anything, it pushes him even further to date white and non-Black women, and it perpetuates the argument between Black men and Black women and this whole race wars and gender wars. Is love really colorblind? Not always, and that's a harsh reality some people face in interracial relationships. That goes for Black and white and any race. And just because you're in love with someone from a different race doesn't mean that the dynamics of race and power disappear. And in fact, they often show up in the most unexpected ways, whether it's in jokes that don't land or in how your partner reacts to discussions about racism and social justice. My husband's not even from America, so there's certain things that he doesn't even understand when it comes to being mixed or part Black or part white. He's from a whole different culture. And then same with him. If he's got things that come up with his culture, and I may not fully understand it. It's a discussion that we have to have. So that's just the reality when you date outside of the race. But when you do it because you're trying to get back at your race of men, that's when it becomes kind of a weird problem. So that brings me to the issue of loyalty to your own community. And some Black women who divest might feel pressure or even guilt for leaving the Black men behind. Those are the ones that are they're not really on the divestment train, but they're not really seeing the reasoning behind why should I. They're not really showing love. They're not really giving that energy of wanting to be with a Black woman. So I understand that part, but this can also manifest as a sort of anger or frustration toward white women, and I see that all the time, who are often seen as benefiting from a system that excludes or devalues Black women. And we already know that that's the case right now anyway. The constant comparison between Black women and white women is exhausting, and then it's frustrating because you have these Black women that are coming at white women and biracials, but then they want to turn around and be with a white man and have biracial children as if that's not the same thing, just reversed. And you end up developing these issues with your daughters, if you have daughters, because now they have a mom who isn't fully embracing her Blackness. And now she's biracial, so those problems come with their own box. You're going to also have some self-hate towards yourself and to your own child. We have to acknowledge that divestment isn't just about abandoning Blackness or seeking validation from whiteness. For some Black women, it's about finding love in a place where they feel valued and respected. However, when Black women are blatantly racist towards white women while simultaneously seeking to attract a white man, it makes them look desperate and unstable. I'm telling you, it doesn't look good. So what does that mean? And I think it's important to have honest conversations, and that's why I made this channel in the first place, because I want to talk about a lot of these different things without people silencing biracials and mixed women, because these experiences that we have are real. It's not something that we're just making up. We're not pointing the finger at Black women. And I appreciate when Black women come on this channel and they see that, okay, I understand that this has happened to you, and not putting themselves in that bucket that we're talking about you. We're not talking about all Black women. We're talking about the Black women who divest but want to also say that white Beckys or biracial Beckys and mutts and call us all these disgusting racist names, but they're going to turn around and have a white man's child. So they're going to look just like us. That's the people we're talking about. And that's why I'm saying this divestment movement, it's kind of like, what's your reasoning behind it? Because if you just like white men, then you don't even call it divestment. You just say I'm dating or I'm married to a white man. I have friends that are Black women that have white husbands for the reason they fell in love. It's not anything to do with race or feeling like the Black men didn't give them attention, or Black men only like white women or non-Black. It's nothing like that. So that is a real thing. But what I'm seeing on YouTube isn't that. If you're going to just be with white men, just be with him in silence, and you don't have to say anything against biracial women or mixed women or white women. How about you guys? Have you experienced or witnessed any of these dynamics in your own relationships or in the relationships of people that you know? Let's start a conversation in the comments. And just remember, we're all here to learn from one another. So let's keep it respectful. So thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you want to see more content like this. Until next time, peace.